Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean. With me is Tanserine and Baines. Hello, guys.
Hello.
And welcome to the Quackcast.
Hello.
Welcome to the Quackcast. Cue the music. Yeah, hello everyone. Welcome to the Quackcast, the Drunkduck Quackcast. This is number 674. Today we're talking about fashion. And that can be fashion in everything, but, fashion in webcomics is a good way to start. Fashion in comics in general, really. But, we can touch on clothing fashions and fashions in whatever, because fashion kind of drives all design. In every single level, things that you don't even think are like driven by fashion, from assault rifles that the military uses, automatic pistols. The design of those things is driven by fashion in so many different levels, like the mechanics, the aesthetics, the style of bullet, the power of bullets, stuff like that. That's all driven by what tends to be popular in certain circles at a certain time. Fashion isn't just about aesthetics and design and clothing or models. It's in everything. This is a comics website that we're sort of all part of, so maybe we should lend that a bit more focus. But before we get into that, we have to get into the featured comic. Quackcast is going to tell us about Curse of the Office Werewoman.
Hello, this is Quackcast, and the feature I've selected for this week is Curse of the Office Werewoman by Cornelius Cool, and it is rated T for Teen. Oliver has achieved a reputation and a promotion for getting work assignments completed in his department for Celine, the office boss and showrunner. Once home, Oliver has game nights and creates art because there is nothing more enjoyable than rolling up a chair to a desk and drawing on a digital tablet. There have been strange occurrences at night that Oliver cannot recollect or explain, and it is when he transforms into Olivia, an overachieving, multitasking master office goddess. Chaos ensues when the sudden transformations confuse the entire office team. The art is drawn and colored digitally. The creator, Cornelius Cool, credits S.M. Carvajal and Slingy on the Duck as co-writers of the comic. Learn how work and play are the same by reading Curse of the Office Werewoman by Cornelius Cool, rated T.
That was Quackcast telling us about the Curse of the Office Werewoman. Alright, so Gumwallis has given us a theme to a comic called Bloodwing Firefist Angel, which was, of course, John Celestri. We interviewed that very person.
Nice.
Yeah. Very cool. So this music is heavy bass and a fiery guitar walk with slow, ponderous steps, shaking the world and burning it down. This is raw, thick, real, tasty, and slathered in barbecue sauce. I hope you like your comic themes. Well done. Take it away, Gumwallis, with your theme too. Bloodwing Firefist Angel. that was Garmolis' theme to Bloodwing Fire Fist Angel. So I hope you like that. John Celestri comic, which is really cool. So he was the guy who did who drew Boba Fett for the first animations of that character, and He-Man and She-Ra and everything, Dragon's Lair, all sorts of stuff. He's a genius. A titan of pop culture. So
Dragon's Lair.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Fantastic artwork. Love that style. All right. So we're talking about fashion in general, fashion on everything, but fashion in webcomics is a good place to start. So there have been a lot of fashions in webcomics over the years. I mean, obviously, webcomics. Let's see. The first webcomics that I really know of were things like a kind of creepy, manga-ish sort of drawn, sketchy comics from back in the day. Can't even remember the names, but that was where webcomics first started out, as people who were sort of actually just posting their zines online, which would have been the earliest webcomics. Just a different way of showing their zines. But that wasn't, I think Sluggy Freelance is an example of that.
Mm.
But so those were the very first ones. But then comics really hit their like real big golden age, I suppose it was, with gamer webcomics, and suddenly that just burst on the scene with all different gamer style webcomics featuring gamer characters, PvP, Control Alt Delete, stuff like that. I can't remember what all the names were. Okay, yeah, there was the Penny Arcade. Those were some big ones, and because those ones became really popular, everybody started doing gamer webcomics. It's always gamer webcomics, and if it wasn't gamer webcomics, so the gamer webcomics would be like 4 panels or 3 panels, usually 4 panels, with 2 guys who are roommates who live together. One of them's like really, sarcastic and whatever, and the other guy's a bit more easygoing, or maybe they're both sarcastic, whatever. So it's this relationship between 2 guys having these kind of like bantering between each other and the adventures they sort of have. And that was the general style of gamer webcomics that everybody copied, and everything was just different variations on that, which is pretty like boring, but it worked, and it captured the imagination and helped webcomics take off. So I think that was the big original fashion in webcomics, the gamer comic. It's not so big now, but it was back in the day.
Right. Kind of Beavis and Butthead-ish, right? Beavis and Butthead would have been first, I think.
Yeah. Very, very, copying that kind of format, I would say. Probably deliberately copying it.
Yeah, that kind of vibe, anyway. Like, definitely a complete contrast to, like, superhero comics and this sort of extreme action, adventure, kind of fantasy stuff.
Yeah, I suppose people would call it the slacker. That would probably be the easiest title to have for it. But
talking. Yeah, it was showing up in movies, and then in the show Seinfeld, and some early 90s movies and stuff like that. Like that kind of vibe was showing up huge in webcomics, though. Yeah.
Very 90s. Yeah, that's funny, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, because this sort of stuff, when it was really around, I think it was the early 2000s. That was when that really had its heyday, in like 2000, 2009, or whatever. Right. So that would have been people who absorbed all that pop culture from the 90s. And that was them regurgitating it in their own way. So yeah, good comment. Right, so like after that, I don't know what the style was. Like there was so many different things. Like webcomics had exploded. then everyone was
Yeah.
doing their own thing for a while. There's a lot more original stuff. Sorry, Thomas.
Yeah, I think that there was this period of Wild West, in a sense, of the web comics. Not that everyone was doing westerns, but everyone was doing their thing, and they had the they had the opportunity to be seen. In like, at least that's my experience of it. And then after that, when the more commercial webcomic hosting platforms started to emerge, we got more rigid trends, at least again, to my experience. So there was this surge easily, I think, in like the previous years, maybe 2010s, with LGBTQ heavy themes, especially boy love. I think that there was, and I say it like this because I think it is an actual category for webcomics, even existing right now in certain platforms. Like they have it like this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's just like the full range of LGBTQ themed comics or just boys. I don't know.
It's very popular because I think
Yeah.
probably it's a gender thing too. So a lot of girls, I mean, maybe this is sexist to say, but a lot of girls were doing expressing their fantasy in a way of doing the whole boy love thing, because that was very much a girl thing. It's not really gay men who do the boy love. It's usually like it's a female fantasy, and that was who was doing it. Whereas the guys weren't focusing on like girl love and doing lesbian comics. The guys were sort of doing more kind of, I don't know, superhero, whatever, different things. But yeah, that was more a girl. A lot of women, I should say, chose that as their medium of self-expression.
Okay. I'll be honest, I haven't looked into it at all. I just report my awareness of trends over the years. And another thing, again, was the slap and kiss sort of thing. And what I mean by this,
slap and kiss.
Yeah, it's the couple, like the boy and the girl, or or the girl and the girl, or the boy and the boy. I mean the couple that hate each other at first, and like they cannot stand each other, and that's the slap part. And then they start loving each other, and that's the kiss part. And I've seen a lot of those. Again, in the more commercial platforms, not so much in platforms like ours. But I have seen that like a lot, almost cookie cutter level. That's how popular it is.
You're talking about currently or in the last few years?
Last few years, but it's still going. This one, like I keep seeing it, and I'm not sure that the other one, like the gay theme, like boy love thing, is waning. I just haven't come across it as much. But the other thing is always like when I try to look for comics elsewhere, like Beyond the Duck, it's always in my face. So,
I mean, that's a construct that's decades old, right? Like I remember that the show Moonlighting way back in the 80s was sort of doing that kind of feisty relationship where the two lead characters would snipe at each other, but there was, kind of sexual tension and sort of like maybe an interest under the surface. But even then, that was considered sort of a return of a trope from probably the 30s or something like that. Like,
of
yeah, this sort of back and forth, spicy banter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it shows that particular one is a trope I really don't like. It gets under my skin really fast. So maybe that's why I notice it more, because I have to just pass
Oh yeah,
comics all the time. Like, oh no, it's the same thing. Pass.
yeah.
Like even if the art is gorgeous, I still cannot really follow the story because it makes me angry. So,
Angry, I like that. Oh dear.
especially if it is played straight and for drama. If it is played like doesn't take itself very seriously, it is more satire. I can tolerate it, but if it is played like super dramatic,
Yeah.
super
Right.
seriously, ah, no.
Right.
I can definitely see how that can be an issue.
Mm.
Like someone
And it,
using the trope,
Mhm.
but it's like they don't realize they're using a trope or something like that. Like
yeah, exactly. And as you guys said, it's an old, super old trope, like Pride and Prejudice is that basically.
Very
Right.
much so,
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. It's exactly that.
yeah,
That's the
uh,
whole point of it.
that's the whole
Much
thing.
Ado About Nothing. I know the movie. I've never read it though. Never read the play.
I
I know the title.
I would need. I
Okay.
always mismatch title and story. There are like 3 or 4 plays that I always mismatch, like Much Ado About Nothing, The Tempest, and a couple more, like which is which.
Okay.
So it may be. I don't know. I have to check it real
Okay. Yeah.
quick.
I always
And I'm
get
I
too
don't know
poor.
well enough.
Tempest.
I've only seen the Kenneth Branagh movie version of Much Ado
Uh-huh.
About Nothing, and it features a couple. It's him and Emma Thompson. They used to be married. Who I think
Mhm.
it's Emma Thompson had this bickering, bantering sort of dislike. I mean, it was exactly what you're talking about, but I don't
Mhm.
know. Like it must be from the play, I guess. But it's a very light romantic comedy and Shakespeare and a slap kiss, like right down the line.
Like The Taming of the Shrew, that's one of those ones that is about
Oh, that's even
Name.
worse somehow.
that. That's
Ugh.
completely that.
That's. I think that's actually. I don't think that's slap and kiss. That's slap and break. Like he
Yeah,
absolutely breaks here. She doesn't. She just capitulates. That's all she does really. So kudos. You
He
you you
tames her.
pointed
right.
out like the trope that is even worse than.
Subverted, yes, or yeah, broken.
The tamed woman.
Yeah. Or to reverse it, the tamed man. That's like that's again the same thing. I hate these things. I hate
It's more a
Oh,
modern thing. You don't really see that
yeah,
in the
I'm going
past.
to
Yeah.
to tame him, to catch him, to snag him. All of that, or snag her.
Right.
Change
I,
him.
I
Fix him.
ah.
That's the taming part. That's when the guy
um,
swears off all his bad boy ways and becomes a good boy and
oh my god, which never happens in real life. Like it doesn't work that way.
hmm.
But I digress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with these fashions web comics, so you're saying the slap and the kiss thing was a web comic fashion. It's funny though. Say okay, in normal comics, superheroes been a huge fashion since the
Yes.
40s mainly. That's when that really kind of hit big. I mean, they'd always had sort of a superhero thing back in the 30s even, but it was in the 40s that became huge with Batman and all this kind of stuff. But in webcomics, like superheroes have never been a big fashion. They've always just been a small kind of sort of separate group. They've always had a bit of a following, but they've never been massive, I think. Like on Drunkduck, we have the Heroes Alliance, which is all the superhero people on Drunkduck who all got together. But they don't represent that bigger group of people.
Right. Yeah.
It's still an awesome collaboration and
fantastic.
very durable. Stands the test of time. So
But yeah, they were a really good like group to go to find out, okay, what's the status of superhero stuff on the duck?
yes.
What are the superhero guys doing? Heroes Alliance. Okay, so there's that. Superheroes weren't such a big thing, like in webcomics. Always, like you say, the manga stuff, that really does kind of like come out more and more and more. And people who have manga influence to their style, like people on Drunkduck, say one of our most enduring popular webcomics forever is Charby the Vampire. Fantastic work, and you can look at that and say, there's a manga influence to her style because of the big eyes and the big expressive faces. But I think Amelius was more influenced by I think original Disney artwork and things like Mighty Mouse and stuff like that. So 1930s artwork.
Yeah.
Was her
cool.
influence.
I would say it leans more that way rather than manga. Like not everything that has huge eyes or big eyes and is manga originated.
But then again, manga was influenced by that same 1930s style. That's where manga and anime come from in their influence.
Okay.
So perhaps there can be like a back and forth. So, you know, Amy is doing the work based on that 1930s stuff with the original influence, but then again she can go, so manga and anime have fun stuff I can draw from because we both have the sort of similar original influence, so I will draw from that. So I don't know, maybe there is that there, like with coloured hair and different expressions and things like that. I suspect that might be the case. I don't know. But there's nothing
Could
wrong
be. I
with
mean,
it.
I don't know.
Sorry, I talked over you guys. What was... Baines, did you say something?
No.
Okay, no worries. Yeah. Anyway, that perhaps so there's a manga, which is a big thing. It's hard to spot a lot of fashions, isn't it? Because what other webcomic fashions?
I could say that I don't know if it is a fashion or at this point the standard approach is that nearly everyone does full color webcomics.
That used
Whereas,
to be very rare back in the day.
yeah, there used to be a lot more black and white or grayscale or, you know, with, how do you call these gradients that are used for shading?
Dots or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Halftone.
They have a
Halftone.
halftone. Thank you. Yeah, that's the one. So there used to be a lot of that. I remember.
Yes.
But easily like 15, 20 years earlier.
Well,
Almost even.
as you're saying that, so I've been reviewing comics for a long time as part of the Drunk Duck, and I used to always like comment, okay, so this comic has digital art, this comic has this style, and it was always like a whole range of different styles of artwork. Now almost every comic is digital art because everyone's got a tablet, everyone's got a digital tablet. Like back when, like in the early 2000s and 2010s or whatever, people didn't all have tablets because they were harder to come by. They just weren't around, especially like screen tablets just weren't a thing. I had them because I had started doing digital art way back in like 2001, 2002. So I've been doing it frickin' forever. But a lot of people weren't able to get tablets for a long time. And then cheaper tablets started to come on the market. Wacom started making cheaper tablets, and then we started to get some more cheaper ones from like China and stuff like that. And then suddenly you had Samsung doing their Note stuff, and then Apple kind of copied with their iPad pencils kind of stuff, and then suddenly it would all kind of it exploded. So yeah, digital art is mainly the main format, but back in the day, that definitely wasn't the main format. The main format, if anything, was like pencil drawings that people would scan, and sometimes digitally color. But now it's hard to find that at all. It's hard to find anything that's not digital art. So that is a huge fashion. Okay, so all right, we're talking about like different kind of fashion stuff. So what is a fashion? Why are fashions? Why do they exist? Okay, so I sort of mentioned this in my preamble, my proposal for you guys for the Quackcast topic. So let's see, fashions are kind of like changing styles. Like it's a wave front of a changing styles, and it's always moving. So, and it's always changing. So at that edge of that wave front, certain styles come up that everyone kind of copies and imitates because they think, oh, that's something new. That's something like it's novel, because we're drawn to novel things, and we're also not only are we drawn to novel things, we like to copy each other. So that's sort of how fashion arises. Mm-hmm. But there are also so things like new technology can influence it, and new advancements, stuff like that. Anyway, so yeah, that's how fashion sort of happens. So what we have is people who are sort of always being influenced by that kind of leading edge, but there's also people who are influenced by like earlier examples of that leading edge. Like you were influenced by something that you liked when it came out, and you stuck with it. Now there's certain reasons you could have stuck with it, like you could have stuck with it because like it was just when you first started to be influenced by fashions. And so you just latched on it because of that, because it was there. So you sort of develop it as your style, and you become sort of in a rut. It's your thing, and you don't ever want to change because that's just how you do stuff. Sometimes it's because it's fully developed fashion. We sort of talked about this in our video, like Art Deco, Art Nouveau. So that became like an amazing art movement, become so developed and ingrained that it became like an amazing art movement that can influence people beyond the time when it was in fashion. So that's another kind of way you can be influenced by stuff. You can have stuff where it's like you draw a bit from this fashion, you create your own style, and that's your thing. It's very rare that you can create your own style from absolute scratch, and like it's not influenced by anything. So normally you have at least a whole bunch of different influences that you can't really point to any particular one as being your main stylistic influence. I think that's more my style. It's like that. And Tance and Baines, you're mostly like that. So Tance, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think it is downright impossible to create your style completely from scratch, because, for example, you are going to by necessity conform to certain elements that will allow you to have normal interactions with other people. Because, for example, if your fashion sense that you build from scratch requires you to wear like like just a condom shaped hat on your genitals and go out, you will have no normal interactions with anyone.
I found that got me into trouble, and that wasn't very popular.
So you have, and again, depending on the culture and society and everything, you have leeway for differentiation and customization of a set of norms that go with the fashion of the times. and therefore I don't think anyone completely builds their own fashion sense, if you like, from scratch. That's what I'm saying. Because yeah, people like societies work on common consensus, and fashion is a common consensus. So you have like, okay, this is our base layer of fashion. We all are going to wear these things in these ways, and but we can customize these things in a variety of ways.
Yeah,
And personalization comes from there onwards.
clothing very much is very, very layered in all different kinds of cultural influences massively. It's so complex when you get right down to it. And you're right, yeah, there's all different rules and barriers and things you bump up against in so many different ways. Comics, I think they're way more open.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, there's still like different like fashions and rules that we don't even think about. Okay, so drawing realistic people, where does that come from? That's not like something that people just decided to do one day. That's a particular stylistic thing that was developed as part of varying cultures, and we all, you know, have a consensus the same way Stance is talking about with clothing fashions. So I mean, because if you look back at art history, there's all different kinds of ways of depicting communicating visually that does not involve realistic humans. Like there's stick figures, and there's, you know, hieroglyph, like side-on portrait imagery, and imagery that's just like with runes and stuff like that, which are based on stylized images. So handprints, things like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything is based on, like you say, different rules and barriers. Sorry, not barriers, like boundaries and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it is vastly freaking complicated. Like, nothing is absolutely created from scratch at all.
Exactly. That said, you can break these consensuses and push for the development of a new consensus. But again, it will be a consensus. Like, for example, I'll give you an example from Greece, which is a pretty conservative society, culturally speaking. You can have like 70% of Greeks are like super leftist, but they are very conservative, culturally speaking. So a guy, a singer at some point, like I think 15, 20 years back, put on a skirt
Okay.
on stage. And when I say skirt, don't like it wasn't like a frilly little tutu kind of thing. It was like a maxi skirt, black, and everyone lost their shit. it was that, it was like the what is he doing? It was like he appended nature or something like that. And consider that we actually have the fustanella, which is a male skirt.
Yeah, you have
And
Greek soldiers standing in front of the parliament wearing these things all the
exactly.
time.
And everyone finds that super manly, which, like, if you are raised in our culture, it is like the manliest thing you could say. But and this dude just put on a maxi skirt, A-line maxi skirt, and everyone didn't know what to do with it. And now it's different, but again, it draws attention. Like, oh, look, he's wearing a skirt. Okay, we are going to talk about it a bit and move on. So the discourse has shifted, but very slowly, and with a lot of disruption in between, is what I'm saying. So.
Okay. Well, yeah, that often happens with fashion, with big changes. I mean, there's also times when women ran into trouble for wearing trousers in public in various different ways, you know, which is really silly because, I mean, like even into the 1980s, for God's sake, women were still running into trouble in various ways for wearing trousers, especially in different professions, like in uniforms and things like that. Oh, how could you have women wearing trousers? That's not feminine. Whereas, like, if you look back in even in the 20th century, so women wearing trousers back in the 1910s, women like jodhpurs became a universal, like what do you call it, like male or female, people wore jodhpurs. That was like the general kind of outfit for if anyone was working on a farm or working or riding horses or working in the country. People just wore jodhpurs. That was just the general kind of country uniform of clothing, and that just totally disappeared after that, like maybe into the 1920s or something like that. Sorry, maybe the 1930s that started to go away. But yeah, trousers had always been around. But yeah, it became this, like into the 80s, you'd still have controversy. Especially, even now. Like there are private girls' schools, I know at least where I am, where like the main style is to have a skirt, a dress. 2024. Why do they still have to wear a dress? Why can't they have trousers as a uniform choice at a girls' school? Like, for goodness sake.
Wow.
Oh dear. It's incredible. But yeah, like people still act as if this is a barrier that has to be fought against. All right. Well, let's talk more about clothing fashions because that's quite fun. So, at the so-called high end of fashion really doesn't exist anymore. It's sort of like disappeared. Like we used to have these big brands. Like Tance was talking. We were talking about this before. Like Balenciaga. That was this guy. Dolce Gabbana. Coco Chanel. There's a whole bunch of different ones. So there used to be a whole bunch of different brands where they would like be the imagined forefront of fashion for high-end ladies. And that used to exist. That doesn't exist anymore because they've all been bought out years ago by like one or two different companies that now control it all. So they just produce they all produce the same thing. And there's nothing fashionable or stylistic or clever about this stuff. It's just another form of generic stuff in order to drive public opinion and create like publicity events and stuff like that. It's just about selling the brand. It's not about creating style any longer, which anybody can see by looking at this crap. It's just shit. Pardon my language. Not interesting. Yeah. Fashion really comes not from that high end anymore. Fashion becomes from a more mid end or mid level of creative designers who want to become like bought out and work for these brands, but they need to get noticed. So they need to produce exciting, interesting things. So that's where fashion really happens in a kind of a mid level. But also from exciting and clever people who come up with their own designs.
Yeah. I read somewhere, and that is super vague, but I honestly cannot for the life of me remember where I read it. I just know it was like from a fashion expert that was writing an article that this high-end haute couture, super gate-kept fashion shows are treated a lot more like sculpture with fabric these days, rather than something that is wearable on the streets. And they really just seek to pass messages and have themes and stuff like that.
Conceptual art.
Yeah. So it's a lot more like an art exhibition, and okay, I can accept that, but that is not wearable fashion anymore. They have developed into something else altogether.
It's not going to
Uh,
influence
in
style anymore. People aren't going to go, oh
yeah,
yeah, that's pretty cool. I'd like to wear that. It's not for you anymore.
no.
Well, actually,
Uh,
all right. So talking about fashion, now I did mention like fashion influences everything, and I gave the example of firearms in the beginning of the Quackcast. And this is interesting. So if you look at different styles of firearms, and people would think, oh no, firearms is just based on practical stuff, like purely practical, because you want to like propel a bullet to kill someone. That's what a gun is designed for. It's for killing. But that's not true. There are there's a lot of different things guns are designed for. But guns are heavily fashion influenced. So you look at the military assault rifle, which was a fashion that was really started in, we don't really know where, but Russia really was really behind the forefront of this, like the early stages. Then Germany came up with their FG-42 or something like that. I can't remember what it was. Like their famous assault rifle from the Second World War. And then very quickly after that, the Russians came up with the AK-47 that people think is a copy of this German weapon, but it's not really. It visually looks the same because fashionably the Kalashnikov was influenced by the look of the gun, but mechanically it's totally different. And then the Americans came up with their M16 and so on and so on and so on. But so those things are sort of developed by like a practical influences to their fashion because people needed different styles of weapon for different reasons. So you need like an intermediate cartridge, something that can propel a bullet with a certain power, be semi-automatic or have an automatic capability, but not be a full machine gun. So they're not going to waste all their bullets. They're not going to fire heavy bullets. They're not going to fire bullets through people like 3 kilometers. That are much shorter range kind of thing. So that had those kind of influences. But so everyone's copying each other for various reasons. They have some kind of practical influences, but everyone sort of wants to have the newest thing. They want to have the new thing that everyone else has got because, that's the way these kind of things work. So in the 1990s, the fashionable style of assault rifle there was two main influences. One of them was the future weapon. So people using a lot of plastics to try and make them lighter, but also make them look futuristic. And they're also wanting to sell them to these countries who are after the new kind of future weapon. So that means you can get a whole lot of like massive hundreds of millions of dollars of investment from these countries' militaries if you can come up with a standard rifle for these people. So they're deliberately making their guns look as futuristic as possible. So there's all these plastic molding and stuff like that makes them look kind of sleek. And it's terrible 90s designs. They look freaking awful. But they have these plastic molding and stuff. But the other main influence from the 1990s was what we call a bullpup, which is where the action of the gun is behind the trigger instead of in front of the trigger, which means your magazine is behind the trigger. And the barrel goes, like a lot of the action of the gun goes into the stock, the part that goes up against your shoulder, the shoulder stock. So all the action is like pushed back into that part of the gun, which means can have a shorter gun, but the barrel is still the same length. And that was a huge fashion back in the 90s. Everyone was doing it. Everyone was buying up these bullpup designs or putting millions of dollars into it. And since that fashion has gone away into the 2000s and everyone's getting rid of that. But it's an interesting thing because we think of fashion as being about like practical, or not practical, but mainly aesthetic things, but it influences practical stuff as well that can totally change based on like styles and new whims and the next greatest thing that people are going for. So that's an important point to bring up because it sort of breaks us out of just thinking about fashion as just being a just purely something that it's taste based, or just based on
Aesthetic.
ephemeral things, or just based on clothing, or based on color choices.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to realize that everything is driven by it, even stuff that we imagine is practical. Like, look at car designs, for example. Go on, Tans.
No, I was just going to bring it back to comics and saying that keeping what you said in mind is very important for when you world build, where inadvertently you will have fashions and fashions in the buildings, fashions in clothing, fashions in like technology, whatever technology there is in your world, and all of that. Even when it is a realistic world, you still have to think about the fashion that you are going to pick for your specific story, because there is no one fashion. There is a range, a spectrum of different fashions, and you have to pick what is yours for your comic, first of all, and also for your characters. So
Yeah, what fits them best? I mean, say
Mhm.
like I like fashions, and I notice a lot of them all the time. So back in the 80s, a big thing was the revival of the 1930s fashions and 19. Okay, so
Mhm.
previously
But
in
in
the 90s,
caricature, they were like in caricature form, like
yeah,
really
simplified
huge.
form.
Yeah, and bigger.
So in the 1970s, you had the 1920s fashion, which was revived in various ways. You see a lot of movies from the 1970s, and they're all doing this fake 1920s thing. In the 1980s, they're all doing fake 1930s stuff. So you have these people in these white suits. That was really popular, which is a 1930s thing. And New Romantic movement was all 1930s retro revival. You see all that kind of stuff in music and fashion in movies and stuff like that. So that was a huge thing.
I would also say in the 80s you had the revival of 40s fashion, like in the power suits and the big shoulder pads and all of that. That was a callback, in my opinion, at least in the militaristic stuff, uh, especially for women, having these really bulky, boxy shapes, uh,
Yeah, especially
especially in
towards
the
the
workplace.
end of the 80s when
Yeah.
it became bigger shoulder pads and stuff like that into the
Mhm.
early 90s. Yeah, it's our fashions are fantastic. I love talking about this stuff. All right, so uh we have what you say about the caricature stuff is interesting, because when people look back at stuff, they look back at the extremes and they think, oh, that's the representative of fashion. So if I want to copy something from this time, I should copy the extreme, which is not real,
Mhm.
because the extreme wasn't what fashion was about back then. Like, the extremes were just the extremes, but people do that, and that's why people have developed this myth about this thing called hair metal. And I did mention this in the last Quackcast, I think.
Right.
Hair metal. And everyone believes in this thing that there was such a thing as hair metal, which is no. Like, okay, so heavy metal emerged as one of the most popular kinds of music back in the 80s because of MTV, because of the rise of videos, music videos, really. So they really, and so these heavy metal bands were very big in like Los Angeles and New York and stuff like that, and they got a lot of TV time. And so these heavy metal bands had started in the 1970s, and they sort of developed a style, and long hair was a thing from the 1970s. So it continued into the 80s. All these bands naturally had that look that had developed originally in the 70s. Long hair, like leather jackets and stuff like that. But because of TV, it got hyped up. So the hair suddenly got more kind of like frizzy with a lot of hairspray and stuff like that. The leather jackets got huge studs. Everything was hyped up and became stage clothes, and that was the look. And this was all heavy metal. There wasn't like thrash metal or like speed metal and all this kind of stuff. That started to come later and split off. And that's just what metal was. But when people look back, they go, oh, hair metal or glam metal and all this, but it was just TV metal. It was basically the mainstream popular metal. That was the thing, yeah. So that's another example of when people look back at stuff, they see a simplified version. So they see all metal as they see all metal. They see this characterized thing, this caricature thing, which they call hair metal. And even like people who are into metal, they believe in this myth, which is really weird to me. Like, come on, develop a bit of perspective, a bit of reality. Anyway, so that's my bugbear, which I will always talk about. Actually, speaking of fashions, and bring it back to comics, not necessarily webcomics, Baines, you might remember this thing from Mad Magazine. There was this particular comic, I think it was called The Lighter Side of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, the one guy who did this comic, and he did it for years, like, since the 1960s or something like that. But so there'd be a situation, the lighter side of going to the dentist, and you'd have all these different like little comics based on that with these different characters doing a scenario based on going to the dentist and comedic things that happened to them, but they'd all be dressed in these 1960s fashions. Always.
Right. That's right.
It was so ridiculous. Like, it was so retro and out of time. And even when he eventually updated it to try and make it more current, they'd still have the 1960s influence. Like, they'd still have sideburns and ridiculous mustaches and huge glasses and weird hairstyles. It was so bizarre.
That's so interesting. Yeah, like I think of an older character who appeared in a lot of those comics with the dark rimmed glasses and the sort of short sleeve button up shirt. Like I have an image of this middle-aged dude. I guess that's kind of a 50s or 60s style.
Yeah, late. Yeah.
Kaputnik? Something like that.
I don't remember the name. The characters often didn't have names in that.
There was one that would always appear, that always had that same look. He had this checkered hat. And I think it was called Kaputnik.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, but it was so ridiculous. So yeah, that was a good kind of like you go, okay, so that's when this guy started the comic, and he never got out of doing that style. That's the only fashion that he knows.
Yeah.
1960s stuff, nothing else. And it was like the height of the 1960s fashion too. It wasn't just like normal people 1960s. This was like really like funky 1960s fashions. That that was all he was interested in doing. And it was like when he started updating it to make it more contemporary, it never really worked because he still had 1960s people wearing modern clothes, which looked dumb.
Like the hair was still 60s-ish.
And the bodies as well.
Unless you had
People are very thin in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Whereas, modern people were kind of thicker and, not that incredibly skinny. Tanta's tapping really loudly on the keyboard.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was muted.
No.
So sorry.
It's horses galloping to get us.
Yeah. It's my incredibly obnoxious typing. I never grew out of hitting the keys, so I'm sorry.
Okay, so we're sort of coming towards the end of the Quackcast now. So, what are your favorite clothing fashions, you guys? What are your like most despised clothing fashion or hair fashions or whatever? What are fashions that you hate or love? Like skinny jeans, denim jackets. What?
I don't know how to call them, but one thing I really hate, well, in general, I don't like things that make the body look disproportionate. So there was this time, like I think in the 90s, where these pants that hung off the hip and allowed the like the boxers from the underwear to show, but
Yeah.
it was really, it got lower and lower and lower on the hips, almost down to the knee, and it became like this dude's waist was at his knees, and it looked really weird and unnatural, and I hate that. So things like this, no matter the decade, I hate. So
It made them look like they had really short legs.
yes,
Really short little dwarf legs and really long arms. So yeah, it made them look
and a
like
gigantic torso. Yeah.
What about you,
Yeah.
Baines?
Not to insult anyone, but the hair on top and shaved on the side.
I hate that.
Having said that, I am an old man, so maybe.
If it's a mohawk, then yeah, go for it, dude. But
Yeah.
I like a mohawk. Yeah.
if it's just hair on top and shaved on the sides, I think of it as that's the Nazi haircut to me. That's
Yes.
Fritz.
Yes.
That's
Yeah, that is
low
a
level
thing.
Nazi.
You cannot unsee it if you have associated it with that. And I always draw it on Nazis. So yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect on a Nazi.
Thank you guys for being on the Quackcast number, Quackcast 674, the Fashion Cast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Baines.
Thank you.
Tars. Fashion, we're the Goon Squad, and we're coming to town. Beep, beep. All right, so bye, everyone. See you next week for
Bye-bye.
Quackcast number 675.
Bye.
Stay sharp.
You gotta look sharp.
Down, meow, meow. She's got the look. She's got the look. She's got the look. She's got the look. All right, bye.